Back with you tonight, Turn in Focus. Thanks for staying on. The first ever African Critical Minerals Summit will take place at the end of August. It aims to create opportunities for the continent by attracting diverse investment partners and creating new as well as sustainable jobs while upskilling the workforce. For more on this, we're joined now by the conference convener, Dr. Clarence Tshitereke. Dr. Clarence, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on tonight. I mean, in broad terms, I understand what the aim is, but talk to me about what gave rise to this idea of the summit in the context, I suppose, of, I'll talk for South Africa, energy insecurity that we are currently dealing with, but I suppose, broadly speaking, even the war in Russia, in Ukraine rather, has created some kind of challenges for the African continent as a whole, hence the African leaders going on this peace mission to try and articulate some of these issues that are born because of this war that's going on there. But in your own understanding, the summit and why it came about.
Thank you, Tabo, and thank you to your viewers. Good evening, and thank you for hosting me in your show. I think there are different ways or perspectives of looking at it. The first one is that as the world is moving away from fossil fuels to green energy sources, there is a demand for certain key minerals that are the ingredients for such things as solar panels, electric vehicles, battery storage, green hydrogen, and even the aerospace industry. And therefore, the demand for these critical minerals is going to grow exponentially, particularly in the run-up to the year, between today and the year 2030, as the demand for green energy sources grows. Now, in relation to South Africa, of course, we have our own challenges with electricity supply, and there is also the alternative, which is increasing in momentum. That's the green energy revolution of solar panels and wind and solar.
So, I mean, even earlier this afternoon, I was having a conversation with some gentlemen saying to us, part of our challenge right now is if we are to go, for example, into the solar space, these products are currently not being produced here in South Africa. So the first question is, do we have the capacity to produce them? Do we have the resources to produce them? And if so, why are we relying on importing finished products?
Well, we do not have the technology to produce such products currently. And we hope that convening a summit of this nature at this level would help us raise the kind of resources that are required to establish the supply value chain and for us to make a meaningful contribution to it. It is also interesting, just for argument's sake, recently Nigeria has just completed its oil refinery, which should be coming on board shortly. Well, we all knew that Nigeria has always had a sufficient endowment of oil resources. Now, if you look at a country like Zambia, it continues to export unrefined copper even today. Well, whether that is sustainable, it's a moot point, and I guess it's part of what we are seeking to establish with this summit, and whether we can attract the necessary resources. Now, in the past, such resources were always vested in the West, particularly in such centers as London. But as you know, there are new alternative sources of funding, such as the New Development Bank or the BRICS Bank, the African Development Bank itself, and even the commercial banks and governments in particular will probably find it attractive to invest in the growing space of green energy technologies, both in terms of attracting the necessary employment opportunities and just for economic reasons as well.
Yeah. From where you're sitting, how long will it take a country like South Africa to close that technical skills gap?
Well, if you look at the reality that our current energy sources are still dependent on fossil fuel, primarily coal, for as much as 85%, it will require us to invest significantly and huge sums of money, perhaps in the next 5 to 10 years from now. Now, the reason why some of these minerals are classified as critical is because the developed countries have established that they cannot produce the kind of products that the green energy revolution requires without such products as manganese, your platinum group metals, your graphite, chromium, lithium, bauxite, and cobalt. Now, it is also fair to say that these are critical minerals of the South, and therefore the extent to which we can manage ourselves and attract the necessary resources and extract those minerals meaningfully is equally just as critical today.
Yeah. And how much of these mineral resources do we have still on the ground? I mean, others would say, I don't know how true it is, certainly that for coal, we still have about 400 years at least of coal that is underneath that we can continue to dig, and hence others are saying they don't understand why we would move away from coal. But if we look at all these other minerals that you've mentioned, copper, nickel, cobalt, and so on and so forth, how much of that do we still have to be able to exploit?
I think to just put it into perspective, Africa is home to at least 30% of all minerals from aluminium to zinc. Some of those minerals are strictly found on the African continent. For instance, between South Africa and Zimbabwe, we have as much as 90% of platinum group metals reserves. Zimbabwe, for instance, will have as much as 80% of global lithium reserves, whereas cobalt is found in the DRC and it produces about 70% of the global reserves. Now, coming back to coal, South Africa should be about fifth or sixth largest reserves of coal in the world. So technically, we can dig up coal and burn it for the next 200 years without really exhausting our reserves.
And when we then have that conversation at the summit, what should, for example, Minister Gwede Mantashe be bringing to the table as a member of this summit, or at least as a contributor in the summit, that certainly would begin to bring us around meaningful conversations?
Even though I don't really speak for him, but I think it will be the confidence that Africans are ready to meet the demand for critical minerals that the global economy requires, and that we have that political stability that will ensure that such minerals are readily available and they continue to be made available as and when they are required. Now, that's primarily the reason why they are classified as critical. It's because they are found in the global south. And there is always fear that there could be political stability that could make it impossible for such minerals to be readily available as and when they are needed.
So, but would that, for example, represent a dramatic shift in terms of strategy around mineral resources? Will it require, for example, a change in the policy framework in terms of licensing and so on and so forth to be able to expedite the process?
Definitely. I would envisage a situation where the demand is one that we can meet, and we cannot meet such demands globally if we do not polish and refine our policy approaches and our applications of such permits for, such as mining rights and for explorations. It is a holistic approach, one that I don't think is strictly restricted to South Africa. It's an approach that requires a continental overview that says we have these minerals in different countries. how do we respond to the global demand? How do we take advantage of the demand of the resources that are embedded in our countries in a way that is meaningful? For argument's sake, if one were to look at how the Middle Eastern countries, the small ones like Qatar and even Saudi Arabia, how they have managed their oil reserves for the benefit of their economies, it is something that I think that presents a model that is worth looking at.
So you touched on it a little bit, interesting models of how we finance this, where the resources would come from. Where would you be looking in terms of partners that could possibly be coming on and be part of the summit to listen to investment opportunities? I'm asking this deliberately because you've got the BRICS bloc that is now beginning to want to change the narrative around the geopolitics, and then you've got the West that is also looking and say there's this scramble for Africa by the East and so on and so forth. So will you be bringing all of them to the table, or will you be looking in a particular direction?
I will definitely be bringing everybody to the table, and the new development bank, the BRICS banks, will be part of our engagements. Now, I guess it depends on who is offering us the best deal as a continent, whether it is for mining explorations in South Africa, or it's about mining cobalt in the DRC or lithium in Zimbabwe. I'm quite certain that those governments will take the best alternative that resonates with their own interests.
Yeah. Creating sustainable jobs while upskilling the workforce, is that an off-the-cuff kind of objective, or is it an objective that would, I suppose, be backed by some in-depth analysis as to what the opportunity really is in terms of employment? I mean, I don't need to tell you about the unemployment situation in South Africa, well over 40%. If you look at the young people in particular, it goes up to about 60% there. And you want to really unlock a whole lot of opportunities for those people to be employed.
Definitely, and I don't think it's only restricted to South Africa. If Zambia, for argument's sake, were to start processing copper and not export it as an unrefined product, there will be jobs created in that value chain. And even some of our own platinum group metals, if we were to start processing them here and not export the products as raw as they are, we will definitely create jobs. There's a demand, or I would say governments across the continent have to meet the growing unemployment crisis, which I think has sort of reached proportions that may be bordering on elements of being unsustainable going forward. We need to create jobs for our young people, and if the green energy revolution presents such opportunities, we must take that opportunity, embrace it, and invest accordingly.
How does this become explored within the continent in the context of the Africa Free Trade Agreement?
That's a different context altogether, because we are not engaging the mineral space in the free trade agreements that we have. The mineral space, minerals that are exported differently outside the context of the free trade agreements.
And would you want to be bringing that into the conversation?
I guess that's the purpose that the summit might have to engage on. It's something, as we are drafting the program, perhaps it's something that we should consider putting it as part of the agenda and see what the deliberations produce. Now, what is interesting is that a number of high-level African leaders will be attending the conference, both as presenters, and therefore it will create an opportunity for them to say what will work for us in the next coming years and what has not worked for us in the past, and how do we correct those mistakes, and how do we take advantage of the opportunities that are readily available, particularly in terms of alternative funding sources, and whether such investments could bring the value chain of production for such minerals and the processing thereof on the continent as a whole.
Dr. Tshitereke, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on tonight on In Focus. That's Dr. Clarence Tshitereke, the conference convener for the African Critical Minerals Summit, which will be taking place on the 29th and the 30th of August in 2023.